West Minster, Massachusetts. The case of the brutal murder of Brendan Chiklis. In the quiet town of West Minster, Massachusetts, the phrase treehouse evokes a chilling horror among locals, rather than happy memories of carefree childhood. Everyone here knows the eerie story that happened on June 23, 2018. That's the day 20-year-old Brendan Chiklis, who worked as a heating repairman, told his mother he was heading to Rindge, New Hampshire to visit his father. The boy got behind the wheel of his gray Honda and drove away, as it later turned out, forever. The mother saw her son for the last time. Brendan, a responsible and decent young man, did not come home. The worried mother contacted the police the very next day, June 24th. Alas, the initial search yielded no results. The investigation found that on the day of his disappearance, Chiklis never made it to his father. No surveillance cameras recorded his car on the way to Rindge. Brendan seemed to have simply vanished into thin air. A week later, on June 29th, Brendan's car was found unlocked in the parking lot of a supermarket in Rindge. The keys were inside. Upon examination, the police found out that someone had thoroughly cleaned the interior, destroying all the prints. It was clear the kid was in trouble. On July 10th, 17 days after Brendan's disappearance, 3 kilometers from the abandoned car, a woman going for a morning jog noticed a black garbage bag wrapped in duct tape on the side of the road. The bag emitted a stench. Inside was the blanket-wrapped body of missing Chiklis. Forensics determined that the death occurred about 2 weeks ago, shortly after the disappearance. There were 13 stab wounds on the body. Next to the corpse, they found Brendan's broken cell phone, which was recovered. Police found that on the morning of June 23rd, Brendan received a voicemail message from an ex-girlfriend, 21-year-old Julia Enright. "Come to our place, I have important news. Don't tell anyone about the meeting." Geolocation data confirmed that between 11:30 a.m. and 3 p.m., Chiklis's phone was in the area of Julia's home. When questioned, Julia admitted that she had invited Brendan over, but according to her, he acted strangely and quickly left in an unknown direction. Her explanation only increased the suspicions of the police. It turned out that in addition to working in the laboratory where Julia was a laboratory paramedic, she had an account on a dating site where she offered special favors to experimenters. In a neighbor's treehouse, Enright held intimate meetings with clients, acting as a tough mistress in BDSM sessions. The girl was obsessed with specific games using animal bones. Brendan and Julia, former classmates, started dating at the age of 18, but 2 years later broke up, not seeing a future together. In her diary, Julia described their affair as a relationship full of passion, rivalry, and hatred. After the breakup, the former lovers remained friends and sometimes met in the ill-fated house for carnal pleasures. Each got a new couple. Enright began dating Jonathan Lind, who fully shared her interests. On July 13th, Julia admitted that on the day of the disappearance, Brendan was indeed at her house. According to her, they drank together, had sex in the car, and then the guy left to look for drugs and did not return. A search of Julia's house turned up a lot of suspicious things. The girl was obsessed with studying dead animals. Her basement revealed a macabre collection of... In the gloomy basement of Julia Enright's house, the police were met with a gruesome sight. On the shelves were vials of blood of varying degrees of freshness, the remains of animals in the process of decomposition, a bucket of rotting organs. There was also a collection of used condoms and an impressive array of knives. Although no traces of Brendan's blood were found in the house, the detective's attention was drawn to a neighbor's treehouse. The inside was suspiciously orderly, but red stains were visible on the wall, the missing boy's blood. Bloody footprints were also found on the ground under the cabin and on the stairs. The floor was covered with new carpeting. The next day, the police discovered Julia's hiding place with her personal diary, an irrefutable piece of evidence. In entries dated June 23rd, the girl detailed how she lured Brendan to the cabin to kill him and present his body as a gift to her new boyfriend, Jonathan. She expected it to bring them closer together, but Jonathan didn't appreciate the bloody surprise. He helped cover his tracks, though, and the couple even had some fun. Julia wrote it all down in her diary in cold blood. On the morning of the 23rd, before the murder, Enright asked Jonathan if he wanted to take a bloodbath together. After waiting for Brendan at the cabin, Julia stabbed him 13 times. Jonathan, who appeared, helped wrap the body in a blanket, stuffed it into a bag, drove it to the state line and dumped it by the roadside. On the car, Chiklis lovers drove away for several kilometers, carefully wiped the traces in the cabin and abandoned the car. Back at the cabin, Julia washed clothes and the couple ordered sushi, while simultaneously texting dead Brendan to provide an alibi. Enright was arrested 2 weeks later. A neighbor reported that she had cleaned the guest house herself shortly before the murder, removing the old carpet completely. In its place was a huge pool of blood that someone had painstakingly cleaned up. Jonathan admitted that he and Julia had been using the cabin for intimate meetings for the past few months, during which they had covered each other in animal blood. According to him, the carpet was changed because Jonathan had soiled it with feces one day after rough sex. But police found a store receipt in Julia's possession. Just 3 days after the murder, she had single-handedly bought a piece of the exact same carpeting. In her car, the victim's blood was found on the mat. There was also Enright's briefcase with documents and business cards, on which were her candid photos, advertising S&M services. A week before the crime, Julia had had an abortion and begged the doctors to give her the embryo to play with its bones. Brendan was completely uninvolved in the conception. A psychiatrist declared Enright sane, finding no serious abnormalities. When the trial began, the defendant suddenly changed her testimony, saying that she killed Brendan in self-defense. According to the lawyer's version, Julia was only defending herself against Brendan's harassment, instinctively grabbing the knife she always carried with her. The defense insisted that the girl's passion for dissecting animals dictated solely by a love of medicine and a desire for knowledge. But the diary entries painted a far more sinister portrait. Back in 2016, just after breaking up with her previous boyfriend, Enright wrote about her fascination with death and her desire to know what it was like to take someone's life. She speculated about dreams of saving the planet from overpopulation and hiding in the woods after a murder. At the trial, Julia tried to present these writings as a figment of a sick fantasy, an attempt to paint a blood-chilling image. Allegedly, her interest in the occult and her obsession with musician Marilyn Manson, known for his dark aesthetic, prompted her to write in a similar vein. A friend of Enright's told the court that the defendant sometimes wrapped dead animals in cling film and left them outdoors to speed decomposition. But neither Julia's explanations nor the defense lawyer's arguments convinced the jury. Too much evidence, the main of which was her own diary with a detailed description of the gruesome massacre, testified against the girl. On November 29, 2021, 24-year-old Julia Enright was sentenced to life in prison with the right to parole after 25 years. Her accomplice and lover, Jonathan Lind, received 10 years in prison for accessory to murder and perjury. Julia's last words sounded belatedly remorseful. "There isn't a day that goes by that I don't think about all of this and wish I could turn back time. Maybe you need to hear this. I apologize to everyone, his parents, his siblings, his loved ones, my family and friends. Know that every night I pray not only for my family, but for all of you." Thus ended this heartbreaking story rooted in childhood fantasies of a treehouse. A story of how twisted passion and bloodlust can drive a man to the unthinkable, turning an abandoned cabin into a hideaway for blood rituals. A story that became a terrible lesson for all the inhabitants of sleepy West Minster and made the whole of America shudder.